On Get Up, and here's what we meant when we said Carson Wentz has already taken his first L in Indy. He's not going to get to keep his number 11 jersey. Colts second-year receiver Michael Pittman Jr., who currently wears the number 11, says he talked to Wentz about the number, and the answer is no on a possible switch. So with a little bit of our tongue in our cheek, we said it's already one loss for Carson Wentz in Indianapolis, but not the kind that matters. And look who gets up with us this morning. Brian Westbrook, Eagles legend, is up here with us today, and we're delighted to see you. We've been trying to get you on the last couple of days because I just want to ask you one question, because you're there sort of living in the middle of it. Now, Carson Wentz was a person who had so much promise, it feels like about 15 minutes ago. How did it all go so wrong seemingly so quickly in Philly?
Well, Greeny, I think a lot of things happened there in Philadelphia. And anytime that I look at these organizations and issues that happen on the team, I always start at the top. You know, how did the ownership, how does the general manager, how does the head coach affect what happens on the field? And so I'm looking at Howie Roseman, and he hasn't drafted very well. And it's obvious that Carson Wentz wasn't on board with a lot of the picks that he made, certainly the Jalen Hurts pick. But then you look at Doug Peterson, a coach that I think is a really good coach. He ends up getting fired a few years after the winning the Super Bowl. And of course, Carson Wentz, a quarterback that you paid a bunch of money just a little bit under 2 years ago. And what happened? That's the big question. And I think there was some issues in the locker room. I think there was some miscommunication between the head coach and general manager and the quarterback. And he lost all types of respect, as well as all the things that you want to have between an organization and a quarterback. And because of that, now those two are not together.
So, Lewis, I mean, as we sit here and listen, and Adam Schefter reporting last week that the coach and the quarterback didn't speak to each other for the period of like 2 months during the season. Lewis, how much of this do we put on Carson Wentz's shoulders himself?
Well, we put a lot of it on Carson Wentz, and it's not all there, Greeny, obviously, but we put a lot of it on him. But I think, again, as Brian was just alluding to, it goes a little bit above him. Because, look, players only will act that way if you enable them and allow them and kind of like maybe indirectly encourage them to feel as though that they are above reproach and they are maybe even, in fact, more powerful than the head coach. I mean, I can't really imagine you going that long as a quarterback and not speaking to the primary play caller, who also happens to be the head coach. I mean, what would make you think as though that's acceptable, or that's something that's healthy, or that's something that is going to help you perform and help this team win football games? So without a doubt, Carson had to get that from somewhere. Some of it is just intrinsic and internal to him. Some of it has to come from the fact that people made you feel as though you're bigger than anyone else in the organization. And that falls, you know, at the doorstep of ownership and the primary decision makers in the front office. So there's a lot of dysfunction to go around here. And no one can really consider themselves to be exempt from blame.
Brian, the piece of it that's on the field, we can see. We can all see what the play looked like. But the piece of it that involves leadership, how reasonable is the criticism of Carson Wentz's leadership as a player and as a leader on that team?
Well, I think it's very reasonable. And here's been the criticism, that Carson has been selfish in situations, that he can do a better job of bringing guys in instead of alienating guys, and that not as far as a guy that's going to help you, because he is always going to be a guy that's going to help you, but a part of a quarterback's job is to get along with everybody. A part of the quarterback job is not to just be this superstar that's getting paid all this money, but also to bring guys together. You are the highest paid player on the team for a reason, because they expect you to be the guy to make everyone around you better and to bring guys closer as far as an organization. I use an example all the time with Drew Brees, and he made a simple statement. I thought this was just key. When, you know, Drew Brees in his 40s trying to associate and get along with some of the younger guys, he said, I began wearing shorter and tighter pants because that's what the younger guys were doing. I want to get along with those guys because I know that I need them to be successful in my career there in New Orleans. And I think that's important. It was a small thing, but I think it's important. Carson Wentz has to learn how to be a guy that the guys on the team want to be around, that the guys on the team want to associate with, because he's going to want to be successful and he's going to need the help of everyone on that football team. That's one of the lessons that Carson Wentz has to certainly learn.
All right, and so we will give him his fresh start that he is looking for in Indianapolis. But as far as what is left behind, in your mind, do you believe that the quarterback, Bryant, that the quarterback of this coming season is already on the roster? Is Jalen Hurts the starting quarterback in Philly, or should they be considering a high draft pick this year at number 6?
That's a big time question going on in Philadelphia right now, figuring out, do you have faith in Jalen Hurts? And I'll tell you this, Jalen Hurts played 4 games last season. I thought he played well in most of those the first halves of those games, but he has to be better. He played like a rookie, and he played like a rookie that didn't start most of the games, that didn't have OTAs, that didn't have the ability to go out there and practice with the ones all season long. So to me, I saw enough that I can say, okay, I'm willing to take a chance with Jalen Hurts this season, allow him to get some off season, allow him to be coached up, allow him to start the season as a starter. And then you can see what type of player he really is. He has the pedigree. He has the ability, the skill set. I think he's good enough. We will see. And here's the deal. If Jalen Hurts is not the guy, let's say he can't figure it out this season, then the Eagles will be drafting high again next year, because when you talk about the talent around him, he doesn't have a bunch of talent around him at this point. So they'll be drafting high if Jalen Hurts is not the guy this season. And potentially at that point, I would look at getting a quarterback.
That's a reasonable way to look at it. What do you think, Lewis? If you were running that ship right now, what are you thinking about with their high draft pick?
Well, look, all right, let me just put myself in the minds of the people who are making decisions there in Philadelphia. They don't look at things as a rebuild. They always look at it as being maybe a couple moves away, a couple smart strategic moves away from being in contention again. So with that being said, are you really hitching your wagon to someone who has thrown less than 150 passes, who was a second-round pick, who really you drafted as a long-term project, not as a year-2 franchise quarterback, and you have nobody else on the roster to challenge him or to really even be a quality backup at this point? So there's no question that in the first round you have to look at drafting a quarterback, especially if the value presents itself and someone who you grade very highly possibly falls to you. There's no question you have to look at it. I know that there are other positions that they need. I know that there were other positions that they could have used that second round pick on a year ago. But the fact of the matter is they misplayed the quarterback position overall in a major way, and that's why they're in this position again where they're having the discussion when we're talking about, do you draft a quarterback at 6? I think it's definitely in play. I think it's probably the position that they go with because, one, they don't have anyone else on the roster, and 2, how they look at themselves as always being contenders, and 3, how they look at themselves as being a quote-unquote quarterback factory, as they call it.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that they play in a division where no one had a winning record last year, so maybe no matter what, you're not all that far away. I got to leave it there. Bryant Westbrook, it's a pleasure to see you. Thank you for getting up with us here this morning. Let's do this again soon. We appreciate it.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Westbrook.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I want to show you who some of these rookie quarterbacks are. This is the group that we are talking about here, because there are 5 quarterbacks who are expected to go in the first half of round 1. The Eagles have the 6th pick, so while not guaranteed, it certainly seems very likely that at least one of these quarterbacks will still be on the board by the time they draft, and maybe more than one. And so let me bring Mike T into the conversation here, and let's look at them. If you were stacking a board right now, Mike, just to make it clear for everybody, if you're a general manager and your team's looking for a quarterback, you're going to take those 5 guys and you're just going to put them in an order, right? If he's there, if he's there, if he's there. In what order would you put those 5 guys, Mike Tannenbaum?
So starting number 1, Trevor Lawrence, quarterback, Clemson. But Greeny, as you have mentioned, there are some blemishes on his record, but he's clearly the number 1 quarterback. He struggled this year against Ohio State, but he's going to go number 1 to Jacksonville. Number 2 is going to be Zach Wilson, quarterback, BYU. He's a dynamic playmaker, great athlete, very accurate down the field. He's going to go second. He's my number 2 quarterback. Number 3 is Mac Jones, a really smart quarterback who was very productive this year, replacing Tua at Alabama. And he's a guy that's moving up a lot of people's draft boards. He's more athletic than people realize. Number 4 is Justin Fields from Ohio State. Had a really good year at Ohio State, even though he struggled a couple times against Northwestern. And obviously in the championship game, he's going to pay a little bit of a Ryan Day tax, Greeny, because some of the game plays, the receivers are so wide open, like against Clemson. So there's such a good play caller in Ryan Day that I've heard a couple teams kind of concerned about what's going to be like when there's close, smaller windows at the next level. And then 5 is Trey Lance from North Dakota. Only played 1 game this year. Great athlete, good arm, but not a big body of work. So those are my top 5.
So those are the 5. You have them in, and there's some dispute amongst different evaluators about the bottom 3. It certainly seem like the bottom, to call them the bottom 3. They're all going to be picked in the high in the first round. But, Lewis, so give me a sense of that. And just to sort of put it in the Eagles' framework here. If we were to assume that Lawrence and Wilson are clearly going to be off the board by the time we get to 6, are you taking one of those 3 guys, if you're Philadelphia, and saying, I'm going to put Justin Fields, as I'm just making one of them up here, and Jalen Hurts and let them battle it out, and that's my quarterback situation?
No doubt. Look, I think the guy who Mike has third is the guy who, to me, is the wild card in this entire draft, and that being Mac Jones. And I think, look, from a mental standpoint, I think he is the guy who is going to separate himself as this whole pre-draft process plays itself out. And I think he's going to surprise some people with the way he tests and his athleticism, because people right now are like considering him to be like this iron deer in the middle of your front yard who can't move in the pocket at all and can't throw on the run. And I think he's going to surprise some people. I think he's a guy who right there has to be in play, both for Philadelphia and for the Carolina Panthers in particular. I think Carolina is the perfect fit for him and Matt Rule and Joe Brady's type in that type of offense. I think it's absolutely perfect. And look, Justin Fields, Trey Lance, those guys are tremendous athletes as well. Look, Trey Lance has a lot of good film up there in North Dakota State, especially in the play-action passing game and his ability to run the football. The same thing with Justin Fields. So all these guys are intriguing, but keep your eye on Mac Jones in particular. I really do think he is a guy who you haven't heard the last of as far as going higher than people think.
Yep, people fell in love with him at the Senior Bowl. He graduated in 2.5 years with a 4.0 GPA and has a master's degree. There are a lot of people in the process talking about him right now. We'll be talking much more as we continue in just a moment. And we take a look at Bill Belichick. Was it just a gap year for Bill and the Patriots? Why one of our crew thinks he's about to torch the entire